thank you all for being here, and I am grateful for the opportunity that all week has been, I've got to experience Oklahoma hospitality, and it's been really wonderful. I've met a lot of great people, made some new friends, and been very grateful for that opportunity. So thank you all for your interest in what I'm about to present, which is really the evidence that has led me to some conclusions. And I'm not going to tell you what to think. I have no interest in being in charge or in control of your thoughts. Excuse me?
No,
okay.
No interruptions.
If you're going to interrupt, I'm going to ask you to leave.
No. We're not doing snark. We're not doing any of that. You're going to give him the respect that he deserves.
I don't think anyone said it.
Okay. Okay. So, I was a small town journalist in Michigan just 10 months ago, just covering stuff from sports to school board meetings and everything in between. And I started around Christmas time, I started looking into the division within the Michigan Republican Party. There was a great deal of it. And I still identify as being, grassroots politically. I'm a person, and I'm on the grassroots. I have no power politically, but I'm interested in coming together with other people within the Republican Party to seek solutions to our problems. And I think that's really what the grassroots is people coming together to create solutions. And the division within the party, as I'm going to talk, what the purpose of this talk is to share with you the evidence that led me to the conclusion that this is not a grassroots versus establishment situation. That doesn't describe the situation that's going on here at all. There's an insurgency that I believe comes from the same place that there is an insurgency within the Democrat Party, that has caused an insurgency within the Democrat Party. And I think we've seen that where they have come together, the Democrat Party, there's been a power that has really infiltrated over the last 25 years or so, the Democrat Party, and has driven the party farther and farther to an extreme. And if you're a Democrat and you don't adopt and you don't move with the ever-changing goalpost, then you'll be quickly called no longer a Democrat, and you'll be kicked out of the party. And so this was very effective for the Democrats, and they had the mainstream media behind them, and I think we all see this, right? And I think the same thing is happening to a large degree within the Republican Party. And so I'm going to poke some idols. I'm going to share the evidence that was very challenging for me to see. When I went into this, I really sided with the people who called themselves the grassroots. They called themselves the real grassroots. Now they call themselves the pure grassroots. In some states, they call themselves the ultra grassroots. And they like to add an adjective before. And so I cited, my bias was towards them. But I realized that where there's two camps that are saying really diametrically opposed things, they couldn't both be right. And so I started looking at the evidence, and this is where it led me. So I'm going to share with you, these are the objectives over the next, it's going to take me probably about an hour and 15 minutes to get through all the evidence that I have to share with you. And I appreciate your patience. I'm going to make an assumption that you're willing, if you're here, you're willing to consider the evidence. And the surest sign of being brainwashed is that you're psychologically incapable of considering evidence that contradicts your brainwashing. So it's very easy to happen. We are President Trump said just a couple weeks ago, he said, we are in a psychological war. And that warfare is not just being targeted towards us from the mainstream media. It's coming from many different angles, and it's very systematic. So I'm going to share with you just a very little about me, because it's not about me. I'm not that significant. I'm just a reporter that started asking questions and started accumulating evidence and thinking that through. There's nothing really that special about me. I think, aside from the fact that I'm born again in Jesus Christ, and I fear him more than I fear man. And there's not much more. There's nothing that really makes me special. So I'm not going to spend much time on me, but the people who don't like what I have to say, who some of them are in the room, right here, there's kind of the elephant in the room. And it's very interesting that they told their followers not to come, but they themselves came. The conclusion, I'm going to share with you the evidence that led me to the conclusion that General Mike Flynn is the enemy of Trump and of MAGA. I'm not telling you you need to come to this conclusion. I encourage you to think for yourself. I encourage you to examine the evidence for yourself and do your own research. The next conclusion is that I'm going to talk about the Flynn Network, what I call the Flynn Network, and how it engages in psychological warfare against MAGA. Oops. I'm going to talk about Mike Flynn's operations to infiltrate state GOPs and local churches. And we're going to talk about the end game, where this is all going, and a few things that we can do and that I think we really need to do. So the first is I got a real kick out of this. This was last Friday. In anticipation of my coming, they wanted to get out ahead of the narrative. It says, Oklahoma Real Grassroots Responds. And yet they weren't really responding because they had no idea what I was going to present. But they held a meeting and they talked about the National Convention. And their link here is to a hit piece written by a man named Brian Ferentz. He's in Arizona. And he's one of the most hateful people that I've encountered. I've never spoken to him. I have interacted with him very little on X. But he wrote a hit piece based on my testimony that I published for Good Friday of this year, knowing that at that point I was already kind of being attacked, because they attacked the messenger, so to try to prevent their people, their followers, from hearing the message. And in my testimony, I shared very joyfully my past. And I was involved in New Age. I grew up in Sedona, Arizona, which is kind of the New Age capital of the world. And I fell into a small New Age kind of self-improvement cult. And I got involved as I was a fortune teller. And I had I was very lost. And thanks to the blood of Jesus Christ and his patient, loving mercy and his persistence of me that I did not deserve at all, and thanks to his love, I came about 9 years ago to saving faith. And I was born again in Jesus Christ. I was given a new heart, and I've been given freedom from shame. And it was inconceivable to me when I made that post and when I posted it, that somebody could watch that. It didn't even occur to me that somebody could watch that and take the things that I joyfully shared about myself, embellish and lie about them, and then say that I still am who I was then. It didn't even occur to me that somebody could be that twisted, but he is. And the group that's represented here, much of the leadership of that group that's represented here in the corner, is denying Christ by sharing that. And I find that sad. It doesn't really even anger me. I find it really sad. And especially since that group includes at least one pastor. And I have called him to repent, and I continue to believe that you need to repent. So this is how it started. in Michigan, the gentleman on the right, his name is Mike Labadie. And he, by his own admission, has a background in the intelligence community. And as I started looking, and I was talking to people on both sides, some whistleblowers came to me because no other journalists had looked into this. And so they came to me and they started telling me their story. And I had about 3 dozen different whistleblowers who came to me telling me about Mike Labadie. He's a shadow operator. I went with the 5 who were willing to go public, who had had the most direct experience with him and with Christina Caramo. And Christina Caramo, she became the state party chair. And but Mike Labadie had complete psychological control over her. And I went into some detail based on the firsthand experiences and the accounts of my whistleblowers. I showed the methods that he used, which are MK Ultra style methods of mind control that he would use in order to win over someone's trust and ultimately brainwash them and gain complete psychological control over them. And he did that to Christina Caramo, and he's very, very specific about the language that she uses. And he controls that language, and so much so that she continues to send out emails that he actually writes. And he writes in a very, I've discussed this with other people who have known him for years. He writes in a very unique style, so it's very clear that he uses a very unique syntax. And it's very clear that it is him that writes those emails. So that's Michigan. And I saw that, and what was happening is he was actually controlling the state party. He was making every decision that Christina Caramo made. She could not make a decision based on the first-person accounts of the people I talked to. She could not make a decision without consulting him first. And so Mike Labadie was really controlling the Michigan State Party, and he was destroying it. He had been, right before he came to Michigan, just months before he came to Michigan, started calling himself a Republican, speaking total MAGA-ese, and using, promoting Christian nationalism. He was a registered Democrat in California. And then he came out to Michigan, appeared out of nowhere, got involved in the party, and 7 years later, he was in charge of the party. He became one of the most powerful people in Republican politics in Michigan. So in that, it was very distressing to me to see how many lives that really impacted. They drove through creating chaos, through I'll get to that in just a second. Through creating chaos and by intimidating people, slandering people, putting out hit pieces kind of like that, lying about people, directly lying. Just like Karen Hardin did this week. Just today, she put out a piece that was based on a phone call where she had 2 really big and blatant lies. She said that Nathan Dahm was responsible for the FEC violation that just came through. It was an outright lie. It was from 2019. So where this started, and that's where I started looking next, is where did this start? And I started looking also at other states. And I did a report on Arizona. My first report on other states was on Arizona, South Carolina, Idaho, Washington, and Oregon. And I found the exact same language, the same types of shadow operators, the same types, exact same narratives, same tactics, working to destroy their opponents psychologically and intimidating them. And it really started on February 6, 2021. And on that day, Steve Bannon had Dan Schultz on his show. And Dan Schultz, he started the precinctstrategy.com. He has an Army intelligence background. He was an Army intelligence officer. And his whole message is that the precinct delegate or precinct committeeman, or here it's the precinct chair, has all the power within the party. And it's a position of extreme power, and the way we save our country is by becoming a precinct delegate, precinct committeeman, precinct chair, and kicking out all the rhinos. Because the rhinos are really the cause of all of the problems. And the problem is that they use the word rhino. I mean, a rhino is a Republican in name only, someone who runs as a Republican even though they know they're not, right? I mean, that's what a rhino is. But they say that there's rhinos within the party. And I have yet to meet a rhino within the party, except for people who are trying to kick out all the people that they call rhinos. And this is a volunteer position. I think everyone in here is grassroots. And anyone who is involved in the party that's volunteering, the rhinos in Washington, D.C., they do so for money and power and influence. There's no power, there's no influence, there's no money that comes for a county chair or a precinct chair. I mean, these are volunteer positions. But they say that anybody that doesn't agree with them is a rhino. So this grassroots versus establishment issue is fundamentally, it's an expression of what Karl Marx described as dialectical materialism, which is defining something by its opposite. So it's creating in your mind the idea that we're in a black and white world. You're either with me or you're against me. So Karl Marx said that there's the proletariat is the working man. And the working man, the proletariat, they're impoverished. They have to work hard. They never get ahead, and they're essentially slaves of the masters, the bourgeoisie, who have all the power, all the money, all the influence. And so the solution, therefore, is to get rid of the bourgeoisie. And you substitute grassroots and establishment, and you talk about the Republican Party, and that's exactly what we have here. It is a Marxist movement that says that this is an issue of grassroots versus establishment. It's not what it is at all. So some common characteristics of this movement within every state. They claim to be the only real Christians in the party. And I've heard so many, they don't tend to let me into their meetings. Unlike, we're gladly letting them in. But if I went to their meetings, I don't think that they would let me in. I would love to go in. I'd love to come back to Oklahoma. I'd love to come to your meetings, and I'd love to talk to your people and present this if you'd let me. And engage, This is about engaging with ideas and with evidence. So they claim to be the only real Christians. And I can't even tell you how many times I've been told that I'm going to hell, that I'm a demon, that I'm Satan, because I disagree with them. They seem to believe that salvation depends on allegiance to their collectivist agenda. And that's really what this is about, is collectivism versus individualism. The Republican Party is the party of individualism. It's not the party of collectivism. But there's a collectivist movement that demands complete and total allegiance and voting as one unified bloc in order to give them power and control. They are marked by hatred towards other Republicans. Now, while there can be, disagreements on both sides, and while it's very easy for anyone, including myself, to fall into defensiveness when attacked, there is one side of this organization that consistently expresses hatred. And I got a text actually today that was forwarded to me from Logan County. And it says, I'll just read you the text because it's just such a great example. This was written by someone who is, I don't know who it is. It said, why are you guys targeting good conservatives? You know what a liar Scott McMahan is. You are putting their lives in danger. I'm not sure whose lives or how I'm putting them in danger. If anything, I think it's the other way around. I don't think you are a true Republican, Jennifer. And this was written to Jennifer, the chair of Logan County. Nor is Raylene, Jim, or any of the rest of your group. You have gotten to go to the convention under false pretenses and establishment, but you're going to find out how it's going to be under Harris and Communist Waltz, because that is whom you're helping. I sure hope that you can look at God on Judgment Day. Like I said, we all know about you. Be sure and take that award with you on Judgment Day to God. And this is not out of the ordinary. I see this every day. I see this every day in Michigan. Not just directed towards me, directed towards the hardest working people in the party. And that's who they target first. Because, you know, they target, they call rhinos, the ones that they call the rhinos and that they target the most are the ones who are the most effective. This is an operation to drain the party of its talent and its treasure in time for this election. They embody rules for thee but not for me. They have no regard for evidence. They are completely intolerant of dissent. Like I said, would any of you commit right now today to having me come back and come to and talk to your group?
I would.
Thank you.
I don't have meetings that, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't have meetings.
Okay. Karen?
I have prayer meetings. I don't have.
Would you commit to having me come to talk to?
Prayer meeting? No, not prayer meeting.
Okay, now I've been told by multiple people that you hold secret meetings and that you have a plan to take over the party.
I don't have secret meetings.
Okay.
So it just is your proof that you don't do your research.
Okay, let's not get into it. Go ahead and finish your thing.
He's the one that
We'll
brought
talk
it
about
up.
later.
So just case in point that there is no willingness to expose their followers to competing ideas. So they embody and embrace Saul Alinsky's rules for radicals. And here are 3 prime examples. Ridicule is man's most potent weapon. There is no defense. It's almost impossible to counterattack ridicule. And these are Saul Alinsky's own words. Also, it infuriates the opposition who then react to your advantage. And it is very effective. I see people all over. I have seen people and talked to people all over the state who are afraid of these people because of this, because of the ridicule that they receive from them. Number 11, the Saul Alinsky Rule 11. If you push a negative hard enough and deep enough, it will break through into its counter side. This is based on the principle that every positive has its negative. We see the left do this a lot. If you push a lie hard enough, ultimately people believe it, right? You push a negative hard enough, you say that it's all about the rhinos hard enough, people will believe it. Number 13, this is one of the most common, is they pick a target, freeze it, personalize it, and polarize it. They've done this with Nathan Dahm. They've done this with Rhonda. In that conversation, if you listen to that conversation that Karen published, she was talking quite a bit about and ridiculing and polarizing and freezing and talking about Rhonda. She accused Rhonda of refusing to allow her into meetings and refusing anyone, not allowing anyone to speak. So the objectives of this whole thing, like I said, to drain the party of its talent and treasure. And this is based on an evaluation of their behavior. This is based on a logical, drawing their actions to their logical conclusion and seeing what the outcomes are. In Michigan, they either kicked out or drove out everyone who had any experience and ability to get things done in the party. There was nobody left in the state party with any experience. It was so bad, I published a piece that I had a high-level source that informed me that President Trump was planning on, and this was both within the Michigan party and Trump's team, that President Trump was planning on sending all the pass-through money to Michigan through Illinois if Christina Karamo wasn't elected, or wasn't removed. And they did remove her, but for 2 months we had 2 state parties. She refused to go. She said that her removal was illegitimate and illegal. She refused to leave. We had 2 state chairs, even after Trump endorsed Pete Hoekstra, her replacement, that she still refused to leave. We had 2 state chairs, we had two bank accounts, 2 mailing lists, 2 websites. We had 2 executive teams. We had 2 state parties for 2 months until a court finally threw her out. She said she wouldn't leave unless she was dragged out in handcuffs. So, and that is their objective, very clearly, is to take control of the party. They say So this Charity Lynch shirt right here, and then you can take Charity Lynch's name off of this, and you can put anyone's name on it. And in any state, her equivalent, they are carbon copies in every state. Just different faces and names. Carbon copies in every state. And this one says, take back the party, take back the republic. They want to take back the party. And you think, okay, well, then what do they want to do with it? They want to solidify their control. They want to make sure that nobody can ever kick them out or remove them. So they use the rules to their favor. They study and they teach how to use the rules to disrupt meetings and to remove people from office. But then once they have power, they change the rules so that can't be done to them. And that's happened, especially in Idaho, is a very prime example of that, another very deep red state. And the state party there has become a communist party, really. And the last state committee meeting, I talked to 2 people who were there, and they said it was completely silent. People were afraid to speak up because they have been doing show trials to remove people from the party. They had, on some technicality, they refused to seat the one county that is most opposed to them. And they wouldn't credential them, so they couldn't vote. And they did that so that Dorothy Moon, the state party chair, would be reelected. And they said it was eerie. They said, in their words, that it felt like they were in the Communist Party, not in the Republican Party. So I'm going to talk about the National Convention. This picture right here is from a training session that was a training meeting that was held in early June, right after the national delegates and alternates were elected in Arizona. And on the screen is a little chart, and it says, it describes kind of and he was talking about what is needed according to the RNC rules for the convention to suspend the rules from the floor and to place a new candidate into nomination. And I had 3 different people at that meeting come to me and tell me about this. But they didn't want their names attached to it because they were afraid that they were going to, very rightfully so, that they were going to be removed as delegates by Shelby Bush and the other leaders there in Arizona. And so I just put kind of a generic piece that shared all of the details, but I said, it was from a state. And they were talking about how they're conspiring with 7 other states, which is what it takes, 8 states to suspend the rules from the floor. And the day after I published this, Trump's team called me, or I had them on the phone, and they said, I know this is Arizona. I said, okay. And they asked me to tell them everything I knew. I shared my sources. I shared the images that were given to me. And they did their own investigation for the next few days. And then they came to the conclusion that the solution was to remove Shelby Bush and 5 others who were responsible for this. And Harmeet Dillon drafted the documents, and they started the process, because there's a process. And then Kari Lake actually kind of swooped in and sweet-talked President Trump into setting it down and said that, they're not going to do anything. Everybody promised to be good, and it was dropped. However, they did get, and maybe if you were there at the National Convention, you saw that the Arizona delegation was seated in a closet, kind of a tunnel in the back. And so I thought that was pretty funny. And a lot of the media did as well. In fact, the Washington Post actually wrote a piece that was the first piece that I've seen anywhere that in the mainstream media that showed that they showed the connections between General Flynn and Shelby Bush, and showed that Shelby Bush and with the help of Flynn and Patrick Byrne and others were working against the interests of President Trump. And normally, what happens? The media is happy to speak, to put negative pieces out there about Flynn, but they always tie that to Trump and say, so this is look at this terrible thing that Flynn's doing, and that's because of Trump, and it's because Trump's terrible. And that's part of the op, in my opinion. So we know what happened on July 13th. There was an attempted assassination on President Trump 2 days before the convention. And Mike Flynn had been working through this operation. As I was looking in other states, I was seeing financial ties to the America Project, Patrick Byrne and Mike Lindell, to the lead operators in every state. And I haven't done that research here in Oklahoma, so I don't know, exactly what the ties are. But there clearly are ties, as we'll explore here in a little bit. But Mike Flynn was talking before the assassination attempt happened. He talked many, many times about how he thought that President Trump was going to get assassinated. And this one right here, this is Ivan Raiklin on Alex Jones' show. And Ivan Raiklin is, after this was, I think, in January, February, Ivan Raiklin is now on the board of directors for America's Future, which is one of Flynn's, it's his family 501c3.
And this is a message directly to every single person on the deep state target list. My assessment, Ivan Raiklin's assessment, that if you assassinate any political presidential candidate, whether it's RFK, whether it's Trump, guess what? America will do the following immediately. They will respond in kind, and they know who you are because we've created the list. So if you
and that's a major Rubicon. They should know that.
Immediately. You're going to see immediate response, and there are only a few buildings in Washington, D.C. that they will probably do that.
Well, I hope that's not the case, but these people are crazy.
And having said that, if they do that, option 2 behind Trump is going to be so much better for us and so much worse.
Well, I was about to say, if they kill him, that's best case scenario from a sick level beating him. Oh, please kill him, but it's so good after that.
Oh, it's going to be the best cleansing and the fastest cleansing that we've ever seen in my lifetime. I assess with almost certainty, with the highest level of confidence, that if they assassinate Trump, it is so game over for them, and it's going to be so fast.
So like I said, Flynn rewarded Raiklin, not necessarily for this, but he has promoted him within his organizations, and he is on the board of directors of his family 501c3. And we'll be talking more about him. So now I want to talk more about Flynn. And when I went into this, I have nothing against Flynn personally. I had nothing against him when I started. I didn't really think about him that much, but this is kind of where, as part of the nexus of PSYOP, psychological operations, military, the military technology for psychological influence and manipulation of individuals and of a populace. And this is an article that was written by these two gentlemen, and the title is From PSYOP to Mind War, The Psychology of Victory. It was written in 1980, and it's an interesting read. It was written by Paul Vallely and Michael Aquino. And eyebrows don't normally do that. They don't do that by accident. And that's styled after the founder of the Church of Satan, who did that to make it look like Satan's horns. And he actually was a member of the Church of Satan. He was kicked out of the Church of Satan in 1975. And this is crazy, but you're welcome to look it up for yourself, and you can verify this. And then after he's kicked out of the Church of Satan, he started the Temple of Set, which blended Satanism, Nazism, and Theosophy, which is kind of like mind control kind of stuff. And this is Stanley McChrystal. Stanley McChrystal, Flynn worked at Stanley McChrystal's side for much of his political career. Flynn was, Michael Aquino, he was a chaplain actually in the Army. He was the only openly satanic chaplain. Maybe they have one now that I don't know about, but he was an openly satanic chaplain in the military. And Flynn was there at Fort Bragg with him. I don't know the extent of their relationship. There are allegations that he is that Aquino is one of Flynn's mentors, or was, at least regarding PSYOP and military intelligence. Stanley McChrystal was also very much involved in military intelligence, and he ran the Afghanistan operations from 2009 to 2011. And Mike Flynn was his right-hand man. He was in charge of JSOC, Joint Special Operations Command. So Flynn was in charge of special operations, and they were very much engaged in PSYOP against the Taliban. And so the simplest way, as I understand it, and I don't have a military intelligence background, so I'm looking at this just kind of as a normal person, trying to figure it out. But the simplest way to understand it is they would seek influencers. They would have different methods of identifying influencers within tribes or towns, and then influencing those influencers. And through that process of influence, and that influence really means psychological manipulation, coercion, maybe financial influence. But Stanley McChrystal, in 2020, he helped to start Defeat Disinfo, an organization called Defeat Disinfo, which was focused exclusively on PSYOP against the American public and against President Trump. And this graphic I did not create. This is from and I'll link to the report on my Substack, but it was written actually in summer, I think the summer of 2020, by someone who it was a military intelligence special ops kind of guy and his blog, and he said that Defeat Disinfo, it used AI. And it was he called it an information warfare platform. And he said that Stanley McChrystal's Defeat Disinfo will utilize AI to, number one, monitor conservative discussions on social media. Number two, intervene by finding the most popular counter narratives. Number three, boost counter narrative via a network of 3.5 million influencers. And then pay users with large followings to attack the president. And this is an example right here. Trump lied, people died, is an example of one of the memes. But Defeat Disinfo was really focused on getting Trump to go along with the shutdowns and the mandates and all of that. And so this is a very prime example of how they use information warfare against Americans to deceive us. And I think we see the fruit of that. We saw that even as it was happening. We witnessed it. The ways that lies were really imposed upon us. So these are three of Flynn's mentors in the military, people that he associated with closely. And he was a lifelong Democrat. He was a Democrat until 2021, in fact, even long after everything happened. He was involved in Trump's presidency. And he was Obama's DIA director, and from 2012 to 2014. And so he was reporting to Brennan and Comey and Clapper and all of those. And the DIA is one of, I believe it's 17 different intelligence agencies within our federal government. Now, I don't know why we need 17 different intelligence agencies, but that's the swamp, and I completely agree with Trump that we need to drain it. This picture right here is, I think it's a really important picture. This picture was taken in December of 2015, and it's at an event that Flynn was paid $45,000 to speak at in Moscow, and he sat and ate dinner there with Putin. And that's Jill Stein on the right, who's a Democrat operative, who was involved in Michigan in 2016, just less than a year after that picture was taken, running influence ops, trying to get the electors, the Trump electors, not to vote for Trump, and also trying to force recounts and all that stuff. Exactly what they accuse us of doing. And they were trying to send an alternate slate of electors for the Democrats and all this. So that's just an interesting picture. Now, Isaiah Flynn's buddy, Mark Zaid, I don't know that they are close personal friends, but I do know that they share a common friend that they are both very close with. And that common friend is Mike Ledeen. And Mike Ledeen, actually, Mike Ledeen's friendship with Flynn is very well documented. In fact, they wrote a book together during Trump's campaign in 2016. And he was, there are multiple articles that show that Mike Ledeen is the first phone call that Mike Flynn made after he got a text message from Ambassador Kislyak from Russia on his government-issued BlackBerry. So Mike Ledeen and Mike Flynn are close, and Mark Zaid and Mike Ledeen are also very close. They go to the same synagogue together. They have, as far as I understand, for decades, and there is documentation of their friendship. So they know each other, at least through a very close related friendship. And Mark Zaid was the architect of Trump's impeachment, which is crazy. So you got somebody that is at least an associate of Flynn, who was the architect of, he's a spy attorney. He's been an attorney for whistleblowers in the military, or within the military and different government agencies. He is able to get a security clearance, so he represents clients for whom a security clearance is necessary because there's classified information or something involved in their case. So he wrote, and I've got a long story about how I got this, but this is a Facebook post that he wrote. And he wrote it on March 17th, 2016. So this is just a few weeks after Flynn joined Trump's campaign. And this is really, I'm going to read just the highlighted portions because this is the most succinct statement of their plan with regards to the Republican Party that I've seen. And the timing is really, really stunning. Remember, 3 weeks after Flynn joined Trump's campaign in 2016. First thing he says is, I would love to see the Republican Party fracture. That's part one. Part two is, I would love to see the right wing of the Republican Party split off and create their own party. That's part two. In Arizona, they started the Patriot Party. This is part of this. And then the third part, and the part that I find most terrifying, is they want to replace the Republican Party with a strong national security party in its place. And I think as Republicans, and thinking Republicans that I assume all of you are, we know that we either have security or we have freedom. And it's a trade-off. So if we think about what circumstances would result in the people of the party demanding the party become a national security party, it's a security crisis. It's not something that I think any of us would like to see. So the FBI during Crossfire Hurricane, which you may recall is the Russia investigation by the FBI, they had a code name for Mike Flynn, and that code name was Crossfire Razor. Starting when Flynn was in the DIA, in 2013, he went into the bowels of the GRU against the protests of the Russia relation director for the CIA, who said that nothing good could come of that meeting. But he went to the GRU, which is the Russian CIA. And he went in, and nobody really knows what he talked about, what he brought with him, or who was with him. But he went into the bowels of the GRU, through all of their security, and that was just the beginning of kind of a long series of connections with Putin and with Russia. And so what many have described is that he took on the stain of Putin and the stain of Russia, and then he deposited it on Trump. And that is what the Crossfire Razor portion of the Crossfire Hurricane operation really was. Without Crossfire Razor, there would not have been a Crossfire Hurricane. He then took this call from Ambassador Kislyak that contradicted the then president. This is after Trump was elected president, but Obama was still the president. What he did on that call is he contradicted the sitting president's foreign policy with Russia. And he did so without talking to his boss. Trump had no idea, he never told him. He lied to Flynn about it, who then said repeated that lie to the media, making Trump look really bad, and then he lied twice to the FBI. And further, after he was only the head of the NSA, the National Security Administration, for I think 23 days. And during that time, there's a documentary that shows what happened when Theresa May, she was the Prime Minister of England, she came with her delegation to the White House and met with Trump and his people. And they're meeting, I believe, in the Oval Office. And it was a very formal meeting. And Theresa May asked President Trump if he had spoken to Putin yet. And he said, no, actually I haven't. And and he said, has he called? And Flynn apparently said, according to the accounts, Flynn said, well, actually he did call. And Trump's like, what? I'm hearing about this now? And he couldn't, like, he was gobsmacked that he would receive a call from Putin and Flynn wouldn't tell him. Until he's in this like formal meeting, it was humiliating. And it showed an extreme dereliction of duty. Flynn was in the military for 30 years. He understood chain of command. He can't plead ignorance to this. And it was really, it had such a derailing impact on Trump's presidency. if you can imagine, if Flynn hadn't done any of that and there was no Russia, I mean, they probably would have tried something else, right? But he did so much to derail Trump's presidency from the very start. So in 2020, after the 2020 election, he ran 3 different operations. And I'm probably going to write a book about this because I haven't seen anyone accurately portray what happened at that time. Those weeks after the 2020 election are some of the most important weeks in our country's history, in my opinion. And there was so much disinformation, misinformation, competing information. It was such a confusing time. But the first operation that I'm just going to talk about very briefly, and I'm really going to talk about the outcome of it, was an operation to manufacture false narratives. And there were several false narratives. There's a report written by Doug Clark of ProPublica, which is a left-wing investigative journalism outlet. And it's called The Big Lie, The Making of the Big Lie. And it talks about 6 or 7 different cases where people within Flynn's orbit were involved, or in Sidney Powell's orbit and that whole orbit, were involved in making up fake stories that they knew were fake. And Sidney Powell actually included them in her lawsuits. And so, just 2 quick ones. One is the Korean airplane full of ballots. And I could talk at length about that, but I won't because we've got so much else to talk about. And you may recall that happened in Arizona. There was supposedly an airplane full of ballots that was unloaded, and half of the ballots were supposedly sent to Maricopa County, the other half supposedly sent to Nevada, but the only problem is none of it actually happened. And I do know, and I can prove it, that Mike Flynn actually was actively involved in that. Joe Oltmann is part of the Flynn network. Now, he denies that he talks to Flynn, but he's on Mike Lindell's Frank Speech network, and he traveled around a lot. He's traveled around a lot with Clay Clark's Reawaken tour, and he came up with a story just a few days, I think it was on November 14th, where he was on an Antifa call. He had infiltrated an Antifa Zoom call in Colorado. And there was a man named Eric Coomer, or Eric, on the call that said that he was with Dominion. And he said, "Don't worry about President Trump getting elected. We've already taken care of that." And he was sued over that, and he lost bigly. And there is no evidence that that call actually happened. He didn't share any screenshots or anything. The other one is the allegations of vote flipping by Dominion in Antrim County, Michigan. I want to talk about this for just a minute. And Matt DePerno was the attorney there, and he had the only legal victory in that time. And that victory was getting a judge to allow for discovery on the Dominion machines. Within hours, and I've spoken with Matt DePerno about this, and it's much of this has been published as well, so this isn't breaking information, but within hours, Mike Flynn had him on the phone directly. The very next day, Patrick Byrne's private jet landed in Antrim County with a few members of ASOG, Allied Special Intelligence Group, which was Flynn's ragtag group of so-called cyber experts, including the one that set up Tina Peters and was never questioned in any way, even though he's the one that did really what Tina Peters is in jail for. And the same thing happened in Antrim County, where Matt DePerno, he's been indicted for multiple felonies for tampering with election equipment, but he never touched the election equipment. It was Flynn's people, and they have never contacted or questioned Flynn's people. And the allegations of vote flipping, a lot of these false made-up stories were designed to try to make us believe that the machines are fraudulent, that the machines flip votes. Now, I have never argued that there are not, I'm double negative, I apologize. I've been consistent in arguing that there are vulnerabilities in the machines, but vulnerabilities do not equal fraud. And there was, every recount that there has been, with the exception of 3,000 double-counted ballots in Fulton County, every recount that there's been from the 2020 election has confirmed the machine tally, the tabulator tally. There was a ballot for every vote in 2020. And that's really significant, because to this day, The Flynn network, which is what I call this media network that Clay Clark certainly has a hand in, is disseminating narratives that suggest that, or that insist, not just suggest, insist that the machines are that they flip votes and that there is machine fraud. And I'm sure this, and I've spoken to people and candidates who knock on doors here in Oklahoma and in many other states that say that there are many, many Trump voters who plan not to vote in this election because the machines are fraudulent, and so there, because of machine flipping, there's no point in voting. Now, the thing about it's a psyop. The thing about the idea of machines flipping votes is that there's no limit to how many they can steal, right? If I believed that machines flip votes, then I wouldn't vote either, because what's the point? They can flip, it doesn't even matter. And that's their whole objective. That's the point, is they want people to believe it. It is oriented towards disenfranchising Republican voters. So the reality, though, is much more encouraging. I do believe that there's fraud, but the fraud is in myriad different ways, and it's ballot stuffing, it's ballot harvesting, and that's not the point of this discussion. But the point of that is that we can overcome it, and that Trump is right that we can be too big to rig. I mean, if there is machine fraud, then Trump's wrong. He's a liar. He's lying to us. We can't be too big to rig. What's the point? But he's not. He sees this, and he knows that we can be too big to rig, and he's doing everything he possibly can with a phenomenal team around him to do that, to go big tent and to do that, and he's doing a great job. So machine fraud is a psyop. The second op in 2020 that is important is December 18th, 2020, there was a meeting. General Flynn, Patrick Byrne, Sidney Powell got into the White House, and there's a long story about even how that happened, but they were trying to persuade Trump to sign the Insurrection Act. Sidney Powell had written a document that they were trying to get Trump to sign that would have enabled the military to seize the ballots and election-related evidence and the machines in the 6 counties and 6 swing states that ultimately determined the outcome. Now, that would have ended Trump's political career. That would have absolutely ended his political career, because there was a ballot for every vote. It would have shown that, at least according to that study, that there was no fraud. And he would have been in jail. I mean, this is the military going in and seizing. The mainstream media would have been justified in saying that this was a military coup attempt. The next operation was January 6th. And you can't say, well, somebody set up January 6th, because there's so many different moving parts, right? I mean, the FBI certainly had a hand in sending, they had at least, Clay Higgins says that there were at least 200 FBI agents there on January 6th, inciting and all of that, dressed as Trump supporters. But there were narratives going throughout by various members of the Flynn network, including Flynn himself. And this is a speech. I'm just not going to do it because we don't have time. But this is on January 5th, and he gave this speech about how this is our last stand. We've got to fight, and we've got to prepare to fight, and and die for our country, and that kind of stuff. This right here, the gentleman on the left, is Robert Patrick Lewis. He is the founder of the First Amendment Praetorian Guard, which was a militia composed mostly of special operations people. And ironically enough, the First Amendment Praetorian Guard leader, it's now defunct, but he threatened to sue me a month or two ago. And I find it rather ironic that the leader of the First Amendment Praetorian Guard is suing a journalist for, and he already is, he's suing other journalists too, for expressing their First Amendment rights. I'll just let him speak for himself.
And there's even one more plan, and that's if they can't get it done through the courts, can't get it done through law enforcement, can't get it done through the military, I still hold firm that there are 2 men that could issue 1 sentence, and there would be at a minimum 10 to 15 million pissed off patriots that would take to the streets and go take it into their own hands. And if you research the Battle of Athens, and I'm working on an article on both the Battle of Athens and the Insurrection Act to help people understand what those really are. But we have the constitutional authority. If the elected officials lose the consent of the governed, as American citizens, we have the constitutional authority to go physically rip them out of their offices, tie them down to a railroad tie, and run them out of town. All right, running them out of town on a.
Okay, so I think that's pretty easy to argue that that is inciting type language, and so there was certainly much of that going on, just as there is much of that going on today in the run-up to the election. There is so much of it, and people that are connected with this network of individuals that Flynn is a part of that are working on inciting people to hopelessness in our electoral system, in our judicial system, in our law enforcement system, in our system of governance. They want people, they argue consistently for hopelessness. And I think you've probably seen that. And if a hopeless people, they have no hope but to pick up arms. And they even use that kind of language, like the time is coming for good people to do bad things to bad people. And Joe Altman actually said that at an event in Colorado with Mike Lindell. Now this video, the other part of J6, is that if Trump wanted 10,000 National Guardsmen to be present on January 6th, and had that happened, the only thing that we would know about January 6th is that it was a peaceful protest and there were a bunch of speakers at different stages. And, but it was denied, and Nancy Pelosi had a hand denying that, but so did the Department of Defense. And she said that at the time. She said that the Department of Defense said that it would be a bad idea, and that she used that to justify her refusal. But there have been 4 whistleblowers within the military who've come before Congress testifying that the reason why the individual, the primary individual within the military that denied that request was General Charlie Flynn, Mike Flynn's brother. And so I'm just going to share this.
Well, can you put it back on full screen?
Yeah.
It's kinda
Thanks.
wonky out.
All right, so this is Major General William Walker. And this is his testimony before Congress.
With the District of Columbia leaders, the Deputy Mayor, Chief Son, Dr. Rodriguez, who was talking about optics, were General Flynn and General Pyatt. And they both said it wouldn't be in their best military advice to advise the Secretary of the Army to have uniformed Guards members at the Capitol during the election confirmation.
Thank you. Mr. Salias? So
that General Flynn there again that he talked about is General Charlie Flynn. And and there's only one time that I'm aware of that anybody in the media has asked Mike Flynn whether or not he talked to Charlie Flynn before that. It was AP, it was on video, and he did not respond. Instead, he got extremely angry. He took off his microphone, he stood up, and he said, because of this, I'm never going to talk to AP again, and I don't know why I do this, and he was just so angry. This is part of Flynn's inner circle, as far as I can tell. And you know, again, I'm looking at this as a historian, as a journalist, just trying to see and you know what I can see. So at the top we've got Patrick Byrne, and Patrick Byrne is certainly very close to Flynn. I mean, they speak to each other and about each other very frequently. He is currently in Dubai. He's been in Azerbaijan and Dubai for the last few months. He says he can't come back to this country because there's a bounty on his head, but he has an interesting background. He speaks Mandarin Chinese. His cat's name is Che Guevara, and his college theses were on Marxism and Maoism. And so, you know, he owns a business called Overstock.com, and that sells cheap Chinese stuff. So I'll just let you come to your own conclusions about that. Bijan Kian he was a member of the the board of directors for the Export-Import Bank, which is extremely powerful. It's kind of like the Fed, but with credit. And he was on the board of directors of the Flynn Intel Group, which was formed at Stanley McChrystal's home address in 2014, right after Flynn left the DIA. and he's also been a member of the board of directors of the America Project. Michael Ledeen, who I already talked about. Ivan Raiklin is certainly part of Flynn's inner circle. He's shared the stage with him throughout his bus tour, movie tour thing. Ann Vandersteel, Joe Flynn, his brother, Laura Logan, Clay Clark, our own illustrious guest, and Roger Stone. And this is just kind of some figures within what I call the Flynn network. And what I want to talk about is Clay's Podcaster Summit. And you're welcome to correct me if anything that I say here is incorrect. At the end, you're welcome to correct me as far as how the Podcaster Summit works. And I've talked to, I have a friend actually that attended it was January or February here in Tulsa, and from another state. And he was called kind of out of the blue. And I have another friend who was also called out of the blue, a friend in Michigan. And the friend in Michigan said, no thanks. But this friend actually went to the event. And it was an event, and there was lots of rah-rah kind of stuff with Mike Flynn, and I think Laura Logan, Ann Vandersteel, those kinds of people. And then they had a scheduling session. And in that scheduling session they scheduled Clay Clark, they scheduled Mike Flynn, they scheduled some big name guests on their show, and then they do all kinds of cross promotion. So my friend that went, he had about 5,000 or 6,000 followers, and he said that the other people that he talked to there, that they were kind of small to mediums, his size or maybe bigger, and they would quickly, through this cross promotion and all this marketing, they would get them up to 100,000 followers. And so I asked him if he would come on my show and talk about that when he got back, and he quickly said, no, I can't do that. And I said, why not? And he said, well, it's just I'm growing, and I need to provide for my family. And so this is just one form of kind of the influence operation. Now an example, the narratives filter through, and if you look at these people on X, and I follow all of them that haven't blocked me, but when you look at them, they all kind of share the same narratives. They filter through very quickly and simultaneously in the same way that we see narratives simultaneously repeated in the mainstream media. And there was an example of this when a ship ran into a bridge in Baltimore several months ago. And at that time, Mike Flynn was going all over different podcasts saying, this is a black swan event, this is a terrorist act. Which is really logically absurd, because if it were a terrorist act, they would have done it during rush hour. There were 10 cars on the bridge, which was a tragedy, but it would have been a real tragedy had it happened if the bridge were full of cars. And if it was a terrorist act, then they would have sought that. And also the evidence pretty clearly shows that it wasn't. It was an accident. There was some sort of power outage or something on the ship. But the point, though, that I'm making is that as soon as he said that message filtered through the whole network. And I think that the reason why he said that, I'm just speculating here, is to test the network and to see how quickly it would filter the message. Now, this picture, maybe it's still there at Clay Clark's compound, but this is what I've seen called an influence map. And right at the center, and I'm going to post this on my Substack so you can study it, because there are many different names here in Oklahoma, but all of the arrows clearly point to Trump. And this is a map of, what the way I see this is, it's a map of how to influence President Trump. Now there are many different names on there that have a red asterisk, and I was told by somebody who was there, who was actually there and saw it, that they believe that is, those are the people that the Clay Clark Flynn network has some level of influence over. And so every name, pretty much any name you can think of in conservative circles is on this board. And this is, in my view, questions at the end, Jackson. This is, in my view, this is an illustration, kind of a business plan of an operation to influence President Trump. So let's talk about Oklahoma and the Oklahoma Republican Party. So it's really interesting to me that in 2022, Mike Flynn himself directly recruited Jackson Lawmeyer, Randy Gellner, who has since stepped away from this group and recognized it, and I say kudos to him, and he's not associated with them, and Paul Bondar and other congressional candidates in 2022. And there are public statements to that he personally recruited them, which was really interesting to me because I haven't seen that in any other state other than his home state of Florida. Where he's getting directly involved. And then when it was announced last week that little me is coming to Oklahoma, Aya Kelly posted on Signal that General Flynn told everybody to share that Christ-denying hit piece about me. And so it's interesting to me that Flynn is so involved in the Oklahoma Republican Party. And we've got other people that are involved on the lieutenant side. And again, I find it absolutely fascinating that the lieutenants are here, but not the followers. They don't want their followers here. They don't want their followers to hear what I have to say, to think for themselves. They want them to think collectively. And I'm not just making that up. I mean, there have been many statements that they've put out through their networks telling people not to show up at these events. And they use the same methods. They attempted the coup against, there was a coup attempt against Nathan Dahm just a couple weeks before the National Convention. And there was a great deal of disappointment from these people when Nathan said that they would not be allowed to be near the microphone and that they would not be allowed to have their voices heard from the floor. And I've heard that from many different people that were there that heard this from them, that they wanted to be heard, that they thought that it was going to be something like a state convention or a county convention where they could disrupt and be heard. But that's not what the National Convention's about. But the thing is that and this is, now I'm just speculating, but had they been had that attempt at Trump's life been successful, I've thought a lot about what would have happened at the National Convention. And Flynn had been working with other states, and he had other operatives in other states working, and they use the same language. So Karen's thing that she wrote today, it appeared today in Michigan. So there's some coordination. It appeared on the Disruptor Telegram channels in Michigan. And so, there clearly is some coordination, and there's financial ties that I've shown in my reports. But, I realized in January that it was really weird how important it was to the lieutenants in Michigan, the biggest, the most trained chaos agents in Michigan. It was really important to them to determine that they would be the national delegates from Michigan. And it just seemed really weird. And if you ask them about it, they wouldn't have a good answer. And then I saw in other states that it was the same thing. It was just very, very important to them who would be the national delegates. And I don't think that any of them, I'm not saying that anyone in this room knew that there would be an attempt on Trump's life. And I don't know if Flynn knew, but I do know that there was nobody on earth who would have benefited more had the assassination attempt been successful. Like what Ivan Raiklin said, the person next in line in that video, you might recall, he said, because the person behind him is so much better. Those were Ivan Raiklin's words. And Flynn had put himself into a position where he could take control over the convention from the floor. And from what I could tell, there were maybe a dozen states where they had the majority of delegates and the delegation chair who had the microphone that were loyal to Flynn. And that there were probably another dozen states that had Trump been absent would have also been loyal to Flynn, ahead of anyone else. And then I think that there may have been a dozen states that were more moderate states and more, you can call them establishment, whatever, that that were more supportive of Nikki Haley. And so I think either a Flynn-Haley ticket or a Haley-Flynn ticket could have been presented as a unification ticket of the establishment coming together with the grassroots. And again, I'm just speculating there. But the point is that there is a coordinated effort. And these people, I could substitute these names with names in any other state, and I would say the exact same thing about them based on their actions, which is what we have to look at. We have to look at their actions, not their words. Because this is information war that we're in. So I said, this is just my brainstorming spitball list. Why is Flynn so interested in Oklahoma? And I think, I suspect, I'm just, again, speculating, that Clay Clark's presence here in Tulsa has something to do with that, because Clay Clark and Flynn are obviously very close. And the last item on this list, I think, is very important also, which is the support of large churches. And as I'm going to get into in a minute, that is a huge priority for Flynn right now, is doing the same thing, infiltrating churches in the same way that he's infiltrated the Republican parties. And this is just, and I'm not, Charity, I'm not singling you out. This is just, I guess I am, but this is just an example of, I was looking for a concentrated example of how language is used and the types of endorsements. And the relationship with Tom Renz I find particularly troubling. Tom Renz is an attorney who is very close with Flynn, and I'm not going to get too much into him other than he is very, very close with Flynn. And I found, Charity, I found your video last week and the insistence that this is grassroots versus establishment, and trying to kind of, discouraging people from coming just to hear a version of what could have, what could be causing the division within the party.
Can I speak to that since you're
At the end. I just find it troubling. But there is, Charity is on, she has or at least she had, I don't know if, and you can tell me at the end if you still do, but there's a live show, a live podcast every Tuesday at noon on the Renz Media Network. This thing right here with Oklahoma Patriots, this logo I find just, frankly, in my opinion, ridiculous. A seed with a cross coming out of it and sprouting. I'll speak now about Christian nationalism. I think it's good for Christians to get involved. Like I said, I think most of us here are professing Christians. I think it's very good for Christians to get involved in politics. And we know, and it's whatever our calling may be, it is most excellent for us very clearly to pursue it. But we know that we're pursuing our calling when we're marked by the fruit of the Spirit, not by the fruit of the flesh. And if we're marked by the fruit of the flesh while we're doing what we're doing, that's not our calling. And we shouldn't be doing that. And further, I would say that we do not want the United States to be, we really don't want the United States to become a Christian nation. And that is the goal of Christian nationalism. Christian nationalism is a form of ethno-nationalism, like white nationalism, that very expressly wants the country to become a nation for and by Christians. The only way to accomplish that is through tyranny. The only way to accomplish that is by eliminating the First Amendment. And I think that's something, we don't live in a black and white world. We live in a gray world. And the Bible demands of us that we think issues through carefully. And that we occupy the gray, and that we're all sinners, every one of us. And those of us who are saved, and odds are not all of us are saved, but those of us who are saved, it's not because of our doing, it's because of His. But we do not want a Christian nation. And any calls for a Christian nation, I think we really should step away from it. And we should say, no, that's not what we want, because the only way we can accomplish that is through tyranny. We want, the Republican Party should be a party for everyone who values freedom and our constitutional freedoms, regardless of what they believe. Amen. Just like the quote that you said from Thomas Jefferson at the beginning, Rhonda, even to question God, even to question the existence of God, that freedom is protected by our First Amendment. Even to express Nazism or something that to most of us I think would be truly evil. That is a freedom that is protected by our First Amendment, and that we should fight and even be willing, if needed, if truly needed, to die for. And we're a long, long way from that. So I want to talk about church infiltration. So just last week, Mike Flynn posted this on X. He said, many people are reaching out to me asking how to help and where to donate. While there are many great people, I'm sorry about the feedback there. While there are many great people and organizations that are conducting rescue, recovery, and humanitarian assistance operations, the one organization that I stand by 100% is Citizens Defending Freedom. And Citizens Defending Freedom is one of his major initiatives. Last month Flynn spoke to 500 pastors through Remnant Alliance, which was an organization, according to Citizens Defending Freedom's website, under Citizens Defending Freedom. So you got Citizens Defending Freedom, you got the Remnant Alliance. And there's nothing that I've seen on their website, on either of those websites, talking about emergency humanitarian assistance. So Flynn is asking for money for humanitarian assistance, but it's going to go to Citizens Defending Freedom, which really ultimately, as far as I can tell, their primary thrust is indoctrinating pastors and bringing them into a Christian nationalist belief. So before I get further to that, I want to share this prayer. This is in 2022, I believe, that Mike Flynn led in a church. And I'll just let him speak for himself. Yeah, thanks.
We are your instrument of those sevenfold rays and all your archangels, all of them.
I am here, O God, and I am the instrument of those sevenfold rays and archangels.
We will not retreat. We will not retreat. We will stand our ground.
And I will not retreat. I will take my stand.
We will not fear to speak. We will be the instrument of your will. Whatever it is.
I will not fear to speak, and I will be the instrument of God's will, whatever it is.
In your name. And the name of your legions.
Here I am, so help me God, in the name of Archangel Michael and his legions.
We are freeborn. And we shall remain freeborn.
I am freeborn, and I shall remain freeborn.
And we shall not be enslaved. By any foe, within or without.
And I shall not be enslaved by any foe within or without.
So that's obviously pretty disturbing. The notion of being freeborn is complete anathema to any form of biblical Christianity. I'm sorry? I will. I just have to bring it down in order to get next after a video. So this is a video, and I would encourage you, I posted a much longer version of this with commentary on a show last week that I did on the Bigger Truth Show. And I would encourage you to watch it and go to the website, theremnantsalliance.com, where you can watch the whole video. It's a video that is oriented towards pastors and persuading pastors to get involved in Remnant Alliance and to join the movement. Now, I was on a X-Space call that Ivan Raiklin was on. I was just listening about a month ago, and there were several people while they were waiting for Ivan to come on that it was like listening to a sales motivation call. They were talking about how many pastors they had recruited into the movement. And one said 50, another said 40. One said, I'm so glad that the Flynn movie has been translated into Spanish, and I'm recruiting Hispanic pastors in Texas and Florida. And he said, I've got 40 already. And this is not a graphic that I created. This is from the Remnant Alliance website. And what they describe, I'm not going to play in the interest of time, I'm not going to play the whole thing, but they work with a few different organizations, and then Citizens Defending Freedom kind of comes in at the end. Now, the Biblical Citizenship Ministry, or whatever it's called, I have nothing against that, and I don't think that they even know necessarily how that is being used by Citizens Defending Freedom. The same thing with Patriot Academy. I think it's Patriot. I'm not sure what that's called. Right next to it, this one right here. I think it's Patriot Academy and Biblical Citizenship. Those are kind of, like how Christians can get involved in politics. And I have nothing, necessarily critical to say about those. I don't know. I haven't taken those courses, so I don't know. But the Liberties Pastors thing, I have spoken to pastors that have been exposed to it, and they say that it is. They described it to me as indoctrination, and it's a 20 to 30 hour course that they use. And the whole driving thrust of what Citizens Defending Freedom is doing is they're trying to make churches into political organizations, and when you add anything to the gospel, all the New Testament writers say that if you add the gospel plus anything is no longer the gospel. And that is what is happening here. They're trying to make the churches into political organizations. And then what I'm going to share, though, is just one part of this video. And again, I strongly encourage watching the whole thing.
So for example, we have three main products. We first have an intelligence department that's human intelligence, but also we can do a deep dive in your community to find, for example, nefarious monies that are happening or nefarious people who are involved or organizations that are involved. So we have an intelligence department. We have a media department that's just stellar. So if a story does come out.
Okay, so he just said that they have an human intelligence department. They're talking about embedding human intelligence resources into churches to monitor what's happening in local communities and within the churches. I find that rather disturbing. Then he talks about a media department, and that media department can produce media propaganda, essentially, on behalf of the church. To engage in local politics. They talk about being involved on the precinct level. Again, I strongly recommend watching the whole video. And they also talk about providing legal resources to these activists within the church. And so in the context of what has been happening within the state Republican parties, I find this extremely concerning. So what is the end game? And I go back to Mark Zaid's 2016 post. And the final thing is really an expression of what they believe the end, or at least what he believed the end game should be. And he said, the strong national security party. So how do they help, how do they help create demand for a strong national security party? And I'll let them speak in their own words about that.
Take on the intelligence community, they have 6 ways from Sunday at getting back at you. So even for a practical, supposedly hard-nosed businessman, he's being really dumb to do this.
What do you think the intelligence community would do if they were motivated?
I don't know, but from what I am told, they are very upset with how he has treated them and talked about them.
And so we have about 14 months. We have about 14 months, give or take, right, going into 2024. And I can't stand up here and tell you we're going to have an election. I'm not. What I'll tell you is that we have to plan for all the scenarios. We've got to plan for all the scenarios. As an intelligence officer, battalion level, all the way up to the highest levels of our government, I always had to look at scenarios. Best case. The worst case is something else that is unimaginable. It's unimaginable to me because the possibilities that exist are no election. National emergency, a declaration of some other crazy pandemic. I mean, they're already talking about some of this stuff. Black swan events are things that nobody imagined could occur, and yet they did, right? And then they have these incredibly, mostly devastating effects, right? Like I think a scenario is these people just decide, look, There's no way in the world that they can win a legitimate, fair election. So let's not have one. So in order to not have one, how do they create the conditions in order to not have an election?
Are you predicting a black swan event before the election that would stop the election?
I am predicting some type of an event that will cause such a dramatic shift in what is happening. The fact that I can think about these things, because my world has always been the world of thinking about how our enemies are thinking. And so if I can think these things, then they certainly can, because I don't assess myself as some evil, genius.
I don't think we'll ever get to the 2024 election.
I've said this, for a while now, that I'm not certain that we're going to have a 2024 election.
So now it's my turn. I have a deep state target list, and I'm coming for all of them. And what does that mean when I say coming for all of them? It means the most legal, moral, and ethical consequences to the maximum, to include the maximum punishment for treason. I personally guarantee that they're going to face those consequences. And you can take a look at that list.
Like, are you going to sue them? Is that what you would do?
Just wait for it.
Okay.
You will see it. It will be so visible for the entire world to see and hear. I'll give you some examples.
Okay.
I'm going to incorporate the precedents that's already been set. So we're going to incorporate what was done to General Flynn. We're going to incorporate what was done to Steve Bannon, what was done to Peter Navarro, what was done to Mike Lindell, what was done to Scott Perry. Translation: expect to see live streamed swatting raids of every single individual on that deep state target list, because the precedence has already been set.
I can get a bunch of people across the state who will train to go into the township meetings and basically take over the township meetings and to demand, by Michigan law, standing law, some very decisive laws that are out there, we're going to demand that they remove the electronic voting machines, or be removed, be charged with the crimes that they're committing, and have the crimes out there that they'll have to acknowledge. And that's the plan.
Who do you think, because you mentioned prosecuting, who do you think would prosecute it? I mean,
we don't really have to. Citizens can remove them at the spot that they're in.
Okay. And what if, part of my
they'll have a chance to resign or goodbye to you.
They're going to come right now and they're going to try and arrest these two ladies who are your sisters. If your sister's up here, what do? You surround them. So everyone, as you call the police in, listen, it's got to happen like this. Like, no. You build, everyone, come on, get out, stop this way. Build a large wall around them. What you say when they come up to have the police arrest them is what you do to one of us, you do to all of us. Say it. What you do to one of us, you do to all of us. Stand with the tyrants or stand with the people. Stand with the tyrants or stand with the people. Say, I can't hear you. And that's what you do over and over again. And they get no peace. Their wives get no peace. Their families get no peace. We call their work. We call them over and over and over again. We want no machines. We want hand counts. We want no mail-in ballots. It's day of bring your ID. We deserve a voice. That's not transparent, and stop lying to us.
We are in a period where we're going to see such a level of desperation in these next 37 days. And I want people to understand that what you think you have been through already, the last 8 years, what we are about to experience in these next couple of weeks, this next month plus, I think that it's going to blow the minds of people. I mean, I think we're going to see some things that we have not experienced as a nation. And
so, I have no idea what Flynn knows. I have no idea whether Flynn knew that the assassination attempt was going to occur. I do know that he talked about it a great deal before it did, and he's talking a great deal about serious unrest right now. And I choose to take that as a warning. And so I just want to go into a few things that we can do now that I think are really important. I think that, we are, I hope I made it clear that we're in an information war, and we're being attacked not just from the mainstream media, we're being attacked not just from the left, but we're being attacked from within. And we need to guard our thoughts. We really need to guard our thoughts. And, there is no one, and that's something that's been disappointing to me, and I think it's consistently disappointing to my audience and people that I interact with as they engage with this information, is who do we trust? And the answer is the only person's discernment that you can trust is your own. And so don't trust anything that anyone says, not even me. Look, with the evidence that I presented here, this is, a dozen plus pieces of evidence narrowed down from hundreds of pieces that I've been sharing over the last 10 months. I really encourage you to subscribe to my Substack, even if you want to do it for free to get the current stuff. There's a lot in my archives. It's just $5 a month, and it's a great way to support me, and I would very much appreciate your support. I don't have, their counterparts love to say about me that I've got some sort of deep state funding, and I think that they've even made that accusation here in Oklahoma, that I have some sort of deep state source of funding. I do not. I am 100% self-funded and funded by my Substack subscribers, and small donors occasionally. And so I would very much appreciate your support. But the point really is to study people's actions, not their words. Because we're in a world, especially right now, where our own military is using psychological warfare against us. And so in that world, there's going to be, just as there was all kinds of conflicting and strange information that was happening with great intensity after the 2020 election, so much so that we're all, myself included, are still confused about what actually happened at that time. And that was part of the point. And that same thing is coming. And I think we all need to prepare ourselves for that prayerfully. I think we need to be in the Word. Because that's the best way to orient our thinking and to make sure that we're seeking the truth. And the next thing is to think about how we define the precinct chair position. The precinct chair is not a position of power and rights. It's a position of responsibilities. The precinct chair position it has the responsibility of knowing the doors within the precinct and helping to get out the vote, knocking on those doors, knowing who in their precinct are fours, who are zeros, knowing who are the independents, knowing who's getting absentee ballots, and chasing those ballots. These are the responsibilities of the precinct chair. Now, I'm not sure how the Democrat Party is structured rules-wise here in Oklahoma, but I have looked into it in Michigan. And if I were to go home in 2 years, next time there's an election for precinct delegate, and decide I'm going to infiltrate the Democrat Party, I'm going to become a Democrat precinct delegate, they wouldn't accept me. And they have the right, according to their own bylaws and their own rules, to determine whether or not somebody who is elected as a precinct delegate is actually a Democrat. Their bylaws very clearly say that even if you're elected, that really doesn't matter. It's not an elected official. The precinct chairs are not duly elected officials. And they say that all the time, but that's just a lie. They're not duly elected officials. They're elected to have the opportunity to serve the party as a volunteer and to take on the responsibility of knowing the doors in their precinct and helping Republicans get elected. And that's really it. In the Democrat Party, I wouldn't even have the right to vote unless I proved that I'm a Democrat by fulfilling my responsibilities. And to me, that sounds a lot more like Republican values. And what we're seeing within the Republican Party with this belief that precinct chairs are entitled to something. There's certainly a sense of entitlement that comes from these people. And, that's not what the precinct chair is about. And so I think that it's a cancer. Just that belief in and of itself is a cancer within the party. And it would solve if we could come together. We talk about uniting as a party. If we could come together around that idea that the precinct chair is a position of responsibilities, not rights, that's what we can unify around. That is what we can unify around. We want to unify? Let's unify around that. The precinct chair position is a position of responsibilities, not rights. If that happened, we could solve our data crisis within the Republican Party, because we do have a data crisis. And it would make the state party relevant again, because then the state party is not relevant. To ask a statewide candidate if they care at all about the state party. They don't. There's nothing that the state party has to offer. But if we had a state party full of precinct chairs who are coming together to fulfill their responsibility, then we would have data and we would have boots on the ground. We would have massive resources to offer state party candidates. Funds would flow. We would be able to talk to donors, and we would have value that we're adding to the political party and to the political process. But we don't, because we're stuck on this idea that this is about a power struggle. And so the next thing, the last thing here, or almost last thing, is there needs to be some sort of, and Telegram's easy because it's free and it's easy to set up. And I have people in Michigan that moderate a statewide Telegram channel for precinct delegates. That's the free speech Telegram channel, because these groups use Signal and Telegram for censorship. They block anybody that asks the wrong questions or has says the wrong things. They block them and they censor them. And so really what is the precinct chairs and county chairs and district chairs, they all need to come together and be able to communicate together from all walks of life throughout the party and communicate without fear of being censored. And I think that's really, really important. I don't see how a party can function at all without that. And then the last thing, and this extra credit, is vote early. Just skip the drama. Vote early, just like Rhonda was saying at the beginning. Voting early, I think, is really important. And it's interesting, too, that those within the Flynn network advocate for voting only on Election Day. And to me, that's a setup. But with that...
Hang on, I'll take it. You take a second. You take a minute. Okay, we're going to go ahead and we're going to open it up for some questions. But what we're going to do first, we're going to allow these people to ask questions, because I believe that you guys have specific questions that you want to ask. You came here to discuss that. So if anyone has any questions that they would like to ask that Scott can answer, I'd be happy to. Lori will come out with a microphone and you can ask your questions.
I'm using two mics, one for amplification.
Yeah, and you're not going to hold the mic. It's gonna be held by Lori, and there need to be questions.
My question is, what was the objective of what you came to give us tonight?
Well, I think to help you to understand the causes of division within the party. It's not a grassroots versus establishment issue. I think all of us in this room are grassroots, and that it's not a black and white situation, and that we can unite. But what we really need to unite around is the responsibilities of the precinct chair. Not one side versus another. We need to unite around really what the purpose of the Republican Party is, which is to elect Republicans. And that's happened in Michigan, by the way. We removed Christina Caramo. We had to take her to court, cost a lot of money. We elected a moderate chair, which I think is really important, because the big donors don't like extremism. And I understand that. I'm not a moderate, but I understand why big donors with great resources and liability would not want extremists. So I think electing a moderate chair is really important, because you need money. A party without money, you can't run a campaign or a party on magic beans. And so and I think that if you could come together, and I don't know how you do this, but it's by talking. But if you could come together and look for a ticket that would represent everyone, and that with a chair that would be a moderate that could actually restore relationships and repair relationships with the donors, and that's willing to work with the people within the party and the populist segment of the party, then you could have a future for the party. I think that a future of the party that is taken over by a group of people that believe that the party is about rights and protecting people's rights, and there's no responsibility. I think that the end of that is disaster. And I don't need to speculate on that because I'm seeing it. We can all see it in Arizona and Idaho. If you look to what is happening in Arizona and Idaho where the parties have been taken over, it is disaster. It's part of the reason why Kerry Lake is down -12 under Trump, because of everything that they're doing. It's the reason why the state legislature in Arizona is about to flip blue. They're about to flip blue. And the reason is because these people are acting like lunatics, and they're censuring Republican incumbents right before a general election. You only do that if you want to lose. I mean, it's absolutely absurd. The whole belief system that you're applying purity tests to candidates, and if you don't meet every single aspect, or you don't really bow the knee to our group, then we're going to try to remove you or censure you. It is self-destructive. So I think that is the understanding that I'm trying to communicate. And I've been told that this is divisive. And I think I don't know how the party can function while the lieutenants that are trying to censor the precinct chairs and prevent them from having access to information. I just don't know how the party can function as long as they're involved in it. In Michigan, we got rid of Christina Caramo, and it was very hard. We got a good chair. Pete Oakster's doing a great job, and they do everything they can with Saul Alinsky tactics to polarize and freeze him and slander him and everything they can possibly do, call him names all the time. They've tried to remove him. They booed him loudly at the last state convention, and Rachel Maddow used that to say, do you think this party should be in charge of the whole country? That's what this is. This is an operation to destroy the Republican Party, and that's what I'm trying to communicate. And it will only end in our destruction. Not just the destruction of the party, but it will make this a one-party state. And that's where we're going, and I've shared an evidentiary trail to try to show that. And there's a lot. And I could talk for 2 hours just about Michigan and how exactly this has happened in Michigan. But the good news is that in Michigan, we went from 2/3 supporting Christina Caramo and supporting the same exact faction to now it's far less than 1/3. And some of them are now coming, and they're embracing the responsibility of the precinct delegate. That's what we call them in Michigan, is the precinct delegate, not the chair. And so they're embracing that responsibility. They're helping to get out the vote, and we're working with them, and it's good. And they've realized that in doing that there are a lot of ideas. And Ronald Reagan said that if you agree with me 80% of the time, you're my friend and ally. Not my 80% friend and ally, not my ally my friend and ally when you agree with me. You're my friend and ally, not my 20% enemy. And that's what we need to embrace.
Question over here.
No.
So I think you have some good points about communication. I agree with that. But I'll go back to a couple of things, because just two things. First of all, read the book Freakonomics, because I'm a surgeon. And I think it's very important when you do research that you actually reference it. None of your things reference, okay? I'm from Michigan, very familiar with what's going on in Michigan. And so again, be careful with what you're saying, because you listed no evidence. So the question is this. You stated the church belongs not in research, not in politics, not anything. Do you know what the Black Robe Regiment is?
Yes, I'm familiar with it.
So do you know why Connecticut's called the Constitution State?
No, I'm not familiar with the history of Connecticut.
The fact that you don't know that, and then you sort of make a statement that the church doesn't belong in the United States, tells me...
No, I did not say it. You're putting words in my mouth.
No,
I did not. No, I did not say it.
Can you ask the question, please?
my question's this. Before you make a lot of the statements you just did, you should go back and understand what the Black Robe Regiment is, why that Connecticut is called the Constitution State. You should understand who wrote that document.
What's your question?
Do you understand why that's called the Constitution
Thank you for your
State?
question.
Okay.
Because if you do,
All right.
you would
Next
not-
next question.
Thank you for your question. Kind of like when people don't know what the 17th Amendment is.
Tanya has a question. I think she. No, I said we would do.
Yeah, and I appreciate that you guys have been respectful, and I will give you a chance to ask questions. I just want to make sure that everybody else has the opportunity to do so.
Well, I'm not going to ask the same questions that I asked you Monday night.
Okay.
Your presentation was totally different. We are different than Michigan. We have people here that are truly trying to wake up the people that have not been involved in our politics.
So, please, if you have a
My
question,
question
because
is-
I want to say that I have heard those exact same words from, cut and paste, exact same words from
Well,
the
I don't cut and paste.
Okay.
I'm an individual, I'm a free thinker, and
Yep.
I'm sorry, but 2020, our churches were shut down, and there's a man here that defied the mayor and kept his church open.
Okay, that's good.
What is the question?
What's your question, Tanya? I don't have a question.
Okay.
Thank you.
You made a good statement. Tanya, were you talking about me?
Okay, my mom is bedbound and I live an hour and a half away.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, Aya, come on over.
Thank you.
So I'm Aya Kelly, and I was the one that was one of the names on the screen. Mr. McMahan, I wear a lot of hats, but I'm also a journalist. And I've been writing for a long time. I have my press pass with me. I'm not sure if you do. But the first thing that you should have done probably before putting my name on there was to talk to me. And the thing that I find most offensive out of all of this, from my own standpoint, is that my name is on a slideshow with the words child trafficking, without anyone ever having asked me questions.
Do you have a
I
question?
do have a question. I'm getting to my question. Thank you.
Those slides were nowhere even near each other, by the way.
I have worked for many years in this state so that people know when I open my mouth, they can depend on every word that comes out of my mouth. There's not a blight on my character. There's not one person in this room who can say there is. So my question is to all of you. I'm here to answer any questions that you have for me.
That's not a question.
With my name.
Do you have a question?
Does
That's not a
anyone
question.
have a question for me?
No.
You are not
That's
the
not what-
speaker tonight. Do you
yeah.
have a question for the speaker?
Perhaps we'll
Seeing none, we'll move on.
Time as a speaker, Aya. Thank you.
This gentleman says he has a question.
Yeah, 10 years ago, you were in a cult. I was serving active duty in the United States Strategic Command, and I just want to know if Clay Clark could get 5 minutes to refute your points.
Now, I think the better thing would be, why don't you do it on your show? You're welcome to do it on your show. If you'd like for me to come on your show, I'd be happy to do that too.
Question back here.
He can't come on your show.
Yeah, you can come on my show too if you'd like.
So, but this is your show, but he can't come on for
This
5
is the
minutes.
Tulsa 912 project,
Right.
and we'd like to take the question from the back of the
Yeah,
room.
this is-
Thank you.
My show.
Okay, I guess maybe I'm clueless and I'm a little bit on the stupid side. Where was the evidence that this statement that you're saying Flynn is against Trump? I didn't see any evidence whatsoever. What I saw was a bunch of innuendos and things out of there. So I'm asking, what was the evidence?
Thank you.
I haven't seen it. They're friends.
Okay, there was actually every video that's on there, I allowed Flynn to use his own words, and Ivan Raikland and several people. There are several videos. That's called evidence. What somebody says, a quotation is called evidence.
They didn't imply what you said. None of it backed up what you said.
Okay, well, you're welcome to do your own research. And I said from the very beginning, you're welcome to do your own conclusion, to come to your own conclusions. I think I provided quite a bit. There were screenshots. I allowed the people to speak from their own words.
What is your question?
So you said, I wrote it down, when Ivan was speaking about Flynn's
Is there a
list,
video of
he
that?
said
That's funny.
Who was
Somebody take
on
a
the
video of
list
that?
and who wasn't.
Somebody take a video of that. That's
Are
funny.
you listening?
Yeah.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
You had said who's on the list and who's not on the list when Ivan was speaking. And you mentioned 3 or 4 people that were on the list
Mm-hmm.
and about 4 or 5 that were not on the list. Did you
Mhm.
see that list?
What list?
The list that you referenced, who's on it and who's not?
Yeah, I've studied his list. Yes.
I'm not very worried, thank you.
Did you have another question?
Of course I did. And so you also stated about...
Are you talking about Ivan's list?
Yes.
Yeah, that's.
And so can you show us copies of it because you didn't?
I have a lot. I do have screenshots of it on my Substack.
Well, that would be something to show if you've got.
I have showed it on my Substack.
Okay, well, I haven't seen it. The other thing is you made a statement about me tonight that I said that Rhonda kept me out of meetings.
Mhm.
And so everybody heard the interview that listened to it. I never said that. And I never said that the FEC ruling was because of Nathan. I said it happened under Nathan.
Okay.
So my question was, did you actually go listen to it? Because you continue to make claims and you're
I was
really
on the call.
loosey-goosey. I know it is. You're really loosey-goosey with your words. As a journalist, you need to be very specific with your words. If somebody says it, that's what they said. You said you're about quotes.
So your question was about...
And so my question is, you said you've worked for other news outlets. I asked you in that interview what those were. Can you name them?
Is that the last question? Do you have?
For now.
Thank you.
Okay. So, yeah, I worked, and I've been very transparent about this.
No, you weren't, because I asked you in the interview and you couldn't name it. I'm just asking. What is it? What did you work for? What newspaper?
It's called the Lapeer County Tribune.
Okay.
And I
You
started.
work there?
No, I don't.
Okay, and how long did you work there?
We started it. We launched it in.
So you launched it.
No, I was his reporter. My buddy started it. We started it because the legacy small town paper in our county, in our conservative county, was owned by big city Democrats. And they weren't reporting on what was happening in the county. So I studied English.
Was that your first journalist job?
Yeah, it was. I studied English in college. I've been writing all my life. So
Okay, well, citations are really good because, again, you didn't...
a quote is a citation.
No, your quote isn't a citation. You've quoted me, but it's not a citation.
Where? Okay.
But it's not a quote.
All right.
Listen, we're not getting in a pissing match.
No, we're not.
So,
I'm just asking where
she's answered your question.
Okay, so we didn't have
We're
an answer.
good.
Thank you.
Let me have that.
Yes, could you explain again Mai Tai that you had my slide in a slideshow with child trafficking, please?
That's an absurd statement. They were several slides apart, and there was never any allegation that you were involved in child trafficking. So that's ridiculous.
Are we able to review the slides and maybe look at the tape that's being made tonight? I'd like to look at a little more in depth.
Yeah, absolutely.
I can answer that. Tulsa 912 records all of its meetings. Can I see how many people come here on a regular monthly basis? Okay, those who do not attend on a monthly basis look like there's quite a few. We record all of our meetings. They are posted on our Facebook page. They are posted on our YouTube. And typically when we have a slide presentation, Brian is so gracious to integrate those in there. So if you'd like to see that, typically it will be up by next week, early next week. We invite you to come watch it.
It's never edited. Nice try, though.
Do you?
Anybody have another question?
Do
Because
you?
if not, we're going to shut it down. We're going to close the meeting.
Yeah.
Charity had something she wanted to say, and you told her when you
Yeah.
were talking.
Right.
Just, if I could have your attention. One, I came today because I heard the meeting was going to be about me, and so thank you for letting me be here. And I just wanted to ask you, do you have Eric Trump's cell phone number? Do you have the cell phone number of Peter Navarro? Do you have the cell phone number of Laura Trump? I do, and I'm their friend. And so I find what you say today to be untrue, and I'm coming here on behalf of Eric Trump and General Flynn. I was actually on the phone with Eric when President Trump was shot. And I was on the phone, it brought me to tears. And I would just pray that everybody here, I do agree that you believe we should all have discernment. And I think we should all go to the Bible tonight and read the Bible. And I appreciate you coming here, and I believe you seek the truth. But I just want you to know that the one statement or question I had is I just wanted you to know, did you know that General Flynn was calling me nonstop, asking for President Trump to increase his security presence to the point of tears before that situation? And I was on the phone with Eric, and this young man was with me in my van when it happened. And so I just want you to know, the question is, did you know that General Flynn was begging for extra protection for Donald J. Trump? So my prayer tonight is that we can all read the Bible. Thank you, Ron, for this platform, and that we can all hope that, that President Trump can return into the White House. And I appreciate your journalism. We all might have different conclusions, but again, I appreciate you asking tough questions, but I just wanted to ask you the question. Did you know that General Flynn was,
I did not know that.
Okay.
So.
Is that it?
Yeah.
And thank you, Rhonda. We may have our disagreements.
No, we do. But that's okay.
We're Big Ten, right?
That's exactly.
And we're going to win an election?
Amen.
All right. So my question is this. Eric Trump is coming to my church with Alina Habba Monday. He was supposed to be here tonight. That's why we're here. Hurricane happened, which, by the way, all of you are invited to come hear from Eric Trump and Alina Habba, because I'm going to specifically ask Eric on stage here in Tulsa. All you have to do when you come to the church, if you don't have a ticket because we're sold out, that's fine. Say Rhonda's name, and I'll make sure our team lets you in, okay? And
your seating will be in the bathroom, but you're going to make it.
No, and Rhonda, I'll give you a VIP ticket, all right?
No, I'm just saying,
you got
listen,
a VIP ticket Monday night, but
We'd love to hear your question.
So,
do you have a question?
Oh, did you have
All right.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I don't need that. I got a big voice. I don't need it. You want it for the video. Okay. So you come Monday night, and I'm going to ask Eric Trump specifically, who you do not know, that he knows I know. Donald Trump Jr. was just at my church as well. So my question is, if what you said is true, are you also then pointing together that Donald Trump must be an absolute idiot? Because not only did he pardon General Michael Flynn, not only has he said he will bring him into his next administration if he wins, which we're going to make happen, right?
When did he say that?
We can give you the video clip. You've got it. Okay. He said it, I think, twice so far at public events or on video. And if all these things are true about Clay Clark, he's a boogeyman. I'm his pastor. If all these things are true, why is Donald Trump Jr. coming to my church? Why is Laura Trump coming to my church? Why is Eric Trump coming to my church? Why is Mayor Rudy Giuliani coming to my church, former attorney for President Trump? Why is Alina Habba, current attorney for President Trump, coming to my church? Why are these people coming? If he's the boogeyman, I'm a bad guy. I'd love to hear your answer.
Great. So, a simple statement that, of that, the very quick summary would be, the adage, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. But I think that there's something more to it than that. Okay. You asked me a question. Please allow me to answer it. So, I think that President Trump has said, he has admitted very recently on several podcasts that he had that he had some bad people around him in 2020, and I think he was incredibly infiltrated in 2020, not just by the Flynn camp, and I'm not just saying Flynn, but the people around Flynn, but also by the Kochs. And I've written several reports, and they're in my archives, showing a pretty detailed evidentiary case for how Trump's campaign, the RNC, and his administration were infiltrated by people who were connected or were directly, antagonistic to his interests. I think Bill Barr is a prime example of that. And Mike Pence is a prime example of that. There were many others. Mike Roman, who ran his election day operations, he ran a private intelligence organization that was founded by the Kochs in 2015 and 16, and he was very close, long-time relationship with the Kochs, who were very antagonistic towards President Trump, and so there are a lot of, and there's much more. He was very much infiltrated, and I think any of us, I think, would probably disagree with several of the things that he said on Twitter. If you scroll through just his Twitter from that time, I think the defeat disinfo that I talked about from Stanley Kubrick, it was very effective, and there were different operations that he's admitted that he was mistaken about some things, and so when. I've seen several very intelligent people become deceived. And Trump is a human being just like all of us, and he's capable of making mistakes. And I think he did make some mistakes around that time. He did a lot of things really good too. He didn't listen to General Flynn and Sidney Powell and Patrick Byrne when they tried to get him to sign the Insurrection Act. And that's, I think that was an example of really great wisdom on his part. So I think that with that said, I think that this is something that I can only really speculate on, but that I think Trump is running a counterintelligence operation himself. And so.
Maybe one more question.
Okay, I've got Charity would like to ask a question.
Okay, so, I'm not allowed, I'll have to ask one question, but please go watch my video. I was not discouraging people from attending. I do want to throw that out because that statement was made several times tonight. I was talking about the timing when we should be working on getting Trump elected and not dividing the party, and that was what I said. But the question is, there was a comment made tonight that your presentation is different tonight, and I specifically had a friend that was at your presentation yesterday that said I really needed to look at Tom Renz and my connection with him, and I said, Tom's a great guy, what are you talking about? And he's like, no, I wait till you hear what this guy's got to say, and then he'll tell you then I want to know what you think of your lawyer friend. And I didn't hear anything disparaging tonight, so was tonight's presentation different than your previous presentations?
I use the exact same slides. And so I think that.
But that was also recorded. That meeting yesterday was also recorded, and so no, it won't be mine because it wasn't my recording, but it is recorded, and you will be able to see it.
Yeah, it will be published.
I'll find out where. Yes, ma'am, I will. So it's 9 o'clock. We're gonna call it quits. I just want you to know that.
Tom did say he would let us ask all of our questions, though. He did.
I did not say all. I did not say all.
Listen, guys, we could stay here. I don't care, Karen. Really don't. I wish I had my sweatshirt on that says "Not today, Karen." However, it was apparent. Anybody that's been involved in the Republican Party in Oklahoma knows that there was stuff going on. And I think that a lot of us had the pictures, had the puzzle pieces, but we didn't quite have the picture for the puzzle to know how to put it together. Now, whether everything, thanks, Matt. Whether everything that Scott has put out is 100% true, or it's to the best of his knowledge, and if he's wrong, I'm certain he will correct it. Mm-hmm. But I want you to know that as this Tulsa County Party Chair and as the president of Tulsa 912, I support free speech. I support looking for the truth, and I don't kick people out of meetings.
And did you vet him before you brought him, though? That's a big question.
Did I do what?
Did you vet him out before you brought him?
Yes, I did. I did, as much as you've been vetted, Karen. So with that, we're going to say good night. Thank you so much. If you're interested in really helping out on the campaign on Tuesday nights at the party headquarters, we're going to be meeting. We have volunteer night. We'll feed you. On Saturday morning, we're doing door knocking. So I would encourage you, come at 9:30 on Saturday morning, or we can even address more postcards. But we're doing everything that we can in Tulsa County to make certain that Donald Trump carries Tulsa County. So when you are told that people are told not to attend and not to help the local party, it's true. So we are doing it in spite of this. So we just delivered 449 voter registration forms to the election board from the state fair. We sold merchandise, we talked to people, we had a great time. So I want to work with everybody. And I'm willing to do that. I'm willing to put aside differences. We have a common goal. And I think that if we will work together these next 2.5 weeks, we can accomplish great things. But regardless, I'm working. So if I see you there, I see you there. And if I don't, sorry we missed you. Thanks.